All right, welcome to Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks, the 100th episode. Woo! I am George K. with the vendor side.
And I'm George A., a Chief Information Security Officer.
And today we are in the hot seat. We are the ones getting interviewed because we have a guest host, the one, the only, Amber DeVilbiss.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Also known as George D. So
yes,
there's that.
Officially.
Bringing the triplets together.
Sweet.
All right, so you have sent in your questions. Thank you very much. This is an Ask Me Anything episode. We have not really prepared, so we're going to answer live fire style, and Amber is going to be the one to read your questions to us, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay, guys, are you ready?
As ready as we'll ever be.
Go for it.
With some industry questions. The first one comes from Neil Saltman. Okay, are you ready for this? Get ready.
Let's do it.
What's the next big thing in cyber? Is it consolidation, specific gaps? AI is the obvious one, so it can't be that.
I like that curveball at the end.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to come around to another. I think someone's lunch is going to get eaten, which is to say a lot of the big players are getting a little slow, or they're taking their eye off core products, or they're Microsoft and everyone's tired of them. So someone's going to come around. I mean, I think we're seeing a little bit of that with Wiz, but somebody's going to come around and like just really nail something in a very innovative way that the big players have taken their eye off the ball. And it's I don't want to say disruptive, but it's going to feel like that.
It sounds like you have insider information on that.
No, I wish I did. That would be amazing. But I sense that right now we're in a period of consolidation, but like every period of consolidation is followed by a very surprise turnaround. I mean, I think we saw that with Symantec and then CrowdStrike. And like that sort of push and pull in the market is almost an inevitability.
Okay. What about you?
I do agree with George that we are definitely in an era of like consolidation, especially in the vendor space at the moment. But where I see innovation heading is not actually at the enterprise level at all. The last kind of untouched frontier of the cyber business is the SMB market, is the household market, is the individual user, selling B2C. I think selling B2C, and I think technology designed specifically for individual households and customers at scale, whoever can actually crack the formula to design a product that provides enterprise level services and technology and capability, but baked down to a household price that you could buy a package at Costco from, that's going to be the one that takes the market. Like George is right. Someone is going to disrupt the whole thing, but it's the person that's going to figure out the formula between value over cost.
Yeah, the reason I think that hasn't been cracked is like the typical VC model, run up and then sell to enterprise, because we're just used to that pattern. And I think it's going to require someone not taking that funding model and doing something different. But that is a completely green field. It's there for the taking.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that needs to stop, because this wouldn't be Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks if we didn't call out nonsense. Innovators and founders need to stop designing point solutions that are literally just built to be acquired. They're not innovating. They're not trying to disrupt anything. They're not trying to make life better. They're trying to go for profit with the same formula they've done for 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Trying to make this widget that Google will buy.
And that's all Black Hat and DEF CON were this year. That's all the conferences are. That needs to die.
All right.
Okay. Moving on to the next one from Alex Hurtado.
Yeah,
Hurtado.
Alex. Yeah,
she's
like
nice.
That.
I like her.
I like that
she's
last
awesome.
name. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you address situations where stakeholders acknowledge the risks but still choose to maintain the status quo? Similar to like a smoker who knows smoking is bad but still continues to do this anyway.
I mean, the CISO definitely has his answer. I think you become comfortable with that discomfort, right? Because of his risk management. Ultimately, it's the security team's job to present the risks, but people are going to also accept risks. And you just kind of have to tamp down the OCD that like wants to secure all the things, because if the business says like, I see you, I hear you, I sign off on this, like we accept this risk, like I guess you have to be comfortable with that.
I think from a CISO perspective, it also comes down to personal liability nowadays. So, there are a couple of tools in the box for us, like D&O insurance, making sure that, any CISO listening to us, make sure you have your D&O insurance. If not, talk to your general counsel. I strongly encourage it. And the other thing, too, is we have to equip ourselves with these things called risk acceptance statements. So when I'm dealing with a CEO or a board member, or it's just someone in a superior position to me, and I'm identifying a risk in something that's directly to do with our project or our infrastructure, if they're still going to push forward and say, well, the business wants to do this, I will say, cool, I have drawn up a very nice, legally verified letter that says, I, as your senior security advisor and professional, have advised against taking this action.
There you go. I love that. CYA.
You have decided that this is in the interest of the business.
Right.
You accept the risk
Yes.
of taking on this decision. I have advised you I am no longer liable.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but 85% of the time, maybe 90% of the time, I put that paper in front of whatever person's asking me to do a thing, that request of theirs goes away. As soon as that liability gets in their face, they don't want to deal with it.
So one of the legacies of cyber growing out of IT, right, was back then you were sort of like the IT crowd was in charge of all the things. But now we have this division. And there has to be this distinction between security team manages the risk, but others own the risk, right? So if marketing wants to go run a whole bunch of SaaS tools off of company credit cards and they've gotten the clearance and they've done the third-party risk assessment or whatever, okay, we all agree. And, the security team is going to help manage some of that risk, but like, it's on you.
Yeah.
You wanted that. You're using it you have to own the risk. I think because of that legacy, the security team just often gets saddled with owning risk that they don't, they're not part of their remit. And so when something goes down, it's like, well, how did you not spot that? I was like, well, we're not using that tool. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a confusion of responsibility and ownership.
Interesting. I feel like when I ran a SOC, there were people outside of the SOC that were using like Trello, and they were putting all of our projects up there.
Correct.
And this was and this was like a compliance guy that was
Yes.
nowhere near the SOC or NOC or anything. And he's just like, but he's still running and overseeing projects for us, right? Which included sensitive data. And I'm like,
My dude.
bro, like, what is this? He's like, no, it's fine. It's like the best thing ever. It's going to keep us on track. I'm like, it's also going to like totally fuck us over. So yeah. Interesting. Okay. This next question comes from Alana Bernal.
Oh, yeah.
I've sat through so many presentations on AI in marketing and cybersecurity, and they all seem to say the same things. Either what we already know or vague generalities.
Word.
Is AI losing its edge? Let's go to you first.
We were just talking about this actually on the drive in. I don't know how you'd word it. I'm the wet blanket for this whole AI parade. Like, I objectively think that in what's available in the market right now and what is a realistic AI-enabled threat or a threat factor, it's a lot of hype. It's a lot of hot air. Like, AI is literally just like a more advanced calculator, if you want to imagine that, because you still have to put in the prompts. You still have to train the data. It is not a sentient thing that can independently think and learn and that kind of thing, right? When that happens, yeah, great. I'll be scared to death. Cool, just like everyone else. But for now, what we get is a fancy image generator, a cool thing that can help you with the presentations, can streamline reports. That's great. But to turn it into this whole thing of just, and this is at a whole of industry level, like it was zero trust before, and it was like getting into your WAFs before that. Like, there's always something that people just linger on, and it's like the big topical buzzword of like whatever the year. I just think AI is a lot of hype, and there are some solid use cases, but it's still in early stage development, and it absolutely does not deserve the degree of marketing investment and hype that it gets, and that's my honest opinion as a technician.
Interesting. What's your take on it? And by the way, this is like a 3-part question. So this is part 1.
Wow. Okay.
It's a lot to answer.
Is it losing its edge? The talk about AI is certainly losing its edge. On the one side, we have sort of the messianic, we're creating super intelligent, god-like alien intelligence, and those people can get the fuck out. The other is more practical, narrow AI. So let's like make that distinction between generative AI and narrow applications that have been in use, especially like machine learning and cyber for decades now. That is still extremely useful. But I think people are intentionally conflating through marketing generative AI because it feels more powerful. Before, it required data science, it required scripting, it required something else. But now the idea that you can just type in like which endpoint was this found on is very appealing. Great. I think that has some use cases in a UI, UX for defenders. But the be-all, end-all, no. The whole job replacement thing, not quite.
Yeah.
Because the law recognizes human liability and not machine liability.
100%. Yeah, as it should. So here's part 2. Do we need a new, more authentic conversation around its real impact? What's a fresh take on AI beyond the usual claims of helping the end user or making our jobs easier?
Yeah, so the thing that strikes me that's missing from the conversation is neural networks and deep learning are predicated on neuroscience from the 1970s. Like that was our understanding of how brains operated. And what's missing is the reflection that this is holding up to us. Like there is psychological evidence and neuroscience. Yes, the way that we see things is around the edges, kind of like how they trained neural nets for image recognition. Great.
Right.
But the other connectivity, the stuff that like, why do you come up with your greatest ideas in the shower or on a walk? Like the unconscious thought. And I think what we're missing is asking ourselves, okay, if we question the premise that it's going to replace us, like what is the value of our thinking? What do our human talents bring to the table? And the idea that is a one-for-one replacement is just bananas dumb. It's like very reductive and inhumane and annoying.
Right. I feel like there's a lot of times where you could have myself or even my partner put something into like ChatGPT, for example, and I'm going to get, no offense, far better responses and outputs because I'm putting a lot more into my inputs, right? So it's all about the creative mind, I think, behind it. And it's also, one thing I think is cool is it's training us to think better, like to think differently and think more thoroughly and more creatively.
In some instances, I think it might also like writing is thinking, and so like I worry about students who I know people who've spent more time editing the output than you could have just sat down and written the thing.
Totally.
So
interesting.
Anyway, I think the reflection of how we think is what's missing from the conversation.
I love that. Are you ready for part 3? I'm going to give you part 3.
Okay.
You ready for this? Okay. How can AI truly revolutionize industries in ways that we're not discussing enough yet? I want to hear something real, as if you guys do anything fake. What's your take?
I think until we get to the point that AI is out of just the pure tech space, pure technology space, right? It's not a Silicon Valley thing. When AI can actually replace the functionality of doctors and engineers and, even potentially surgeons, right, if you're getting robotics involved, because we have to think of robotics in the conversation as well.
Yes,
and I know you have background
embodied
robotics.
AI.
Yeah.
Like, I know you have a big background in robotics too, so like you kind of get that correlation. And actually something interesting that I saw, given, where my primary employer is, like I work in the online dating space, so I work in the sex tech space. And sex tech is doing some really innovative things around AI. So around AI companions, where people are actually having full relationships with AI figures. And there's another thing too before that, where there is a movement of a certain demographic of people who actually have these dolls as their partner. And these dolls are actually like dolls or robots, but they're like live action. Now though, what you're seeing on the cutting edge, I was actually just at a conference in August in Montreal, Love and Sex with Robots, and they were talking about the utilization of AI into those sex bots, into those sex dolls. So then what you're creating is a more closer to life companion if you're going to go down the artificial companion route. So, and if you think of that Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her, I really liked that movie because that was a good futuristic take on it. But again, until like AI can actually run the machines and we have the robots that can communicate with the AI in a way that we can replace the need for manual labor, I think that's the groundbreaking thing people are looking for. And we're dealing with things right now. In the U.S. there's a big labor dispute with the longshoremen's union because they don't want AI implemented into their process, right? So they're actually stopping the direct type of disruptive progress that I'm talking about. And so that I think is going to be where the real frontier is, because as long as it's just stuck in tech and it's just a Silicon Valley thing or a Tel Aviv thing, no one outside of our world is going to give a shit.
Yeah.
Going back to the way we think, other than sex
that's what
robots,
I was gonna say.
is like the most innovative uses of AI that I have seen that don't get any press because it doesn't involve Sam Altman or whatever the hell, is humans' ability to imagine ways to investigate things and take advantage of the full potential of machine learning to do things at orders of magnitude faster or greater scale, right? So, for example, this team that innovated catheters, which is the most banal of technologies, but upstream infection from catheters is responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths every year. But it's like a vital piece of equipment in the hospital. So they were able to analyze fluid dynamics in catheters, which is notoriously difficult. Fluid dynamics is like, it's like chaos theory stuff, right? Like, it's very hard and randomized. And finding patterns, again, at a speed which might have taken humans like thousands of years of analyzing that data, were able to innovate like small changes in the shape inside the tubing and use 3D printing to do that, right? So they reduced upstream infections by 30%. This is something that could save lives,
100%.
and it's machine learning, but it's not like AGI.
It's not mainstream yet.
Yeah, so it doesn't like get. So I think for Alana's question, that is still takes the creativity of human scientists to be like, if only we could solve this fucking problem that would take me 3,000 years to do manually, then you can apply that magic. But you have to have that creative spark, and you also have to have that essentially humane touch. Like, I want to solve this problem.
Yeah.
But you got to remember one other factor that we're not thinking about: the amount of power in GPUs necessary to talk about the functionality you're speaking of.
Yeah,
it makes it extremely limiting. I think what's going to be the real groundbreaker, and I've been saying this like some kind of John the Baptist at every conference and every talk I've done for the last 3 or 4 years, the real tectonic shift we're going to experience is once we've reached like QCD, once quantum computing becomes consumable by the mainstream, then we can actually power that kind of functionality at scale. I think that's the thing that we need to worry about, that we need to look forward to. Compute is the thing, man.
I'm so excited you said that. We have some stuff coming up around that.
Yay.
For Teach Good Sick. Okay, well, that's great. So there you go, Alana. There you go. There's your bedtime story of answers. Okay, now it's
Sex
time.
robots and catheters, Alana.
That's how we do it here on this podcast. Okay, this next question is from Caroline Jacobs. I have a burning question that's probably off topic, but I want to know anyway. Perfect.
Yep,
In the
we're here
world
for
of
it.
political deepfakes and disinformation, are we seeing more of these targeted at one party versus another?
No, I mean, I did a lot of disinformation research in 2018, 2019. And then it was like the mental model of Russian election interference was militarized, right? Because that's sort of the Cold War mental model that we had, was they're lining up these cannons on the border and they're just firing misinformation into the pool. And I had done this network analysis, and I went to Cyber Command, and I was like, it's not full frontal assault. It's a drug trafficking, right? It's like they're sending the supplies in, and they have certain accounts, and that is like the dealer, and that's a better metaphor. But the problem is, and myself and many others predicted that once the playbook was out there, the threat was not going to come. It was going to stay outside, but it was also going to come from within, right? It's there. And so it's very tempting that if you want your side to win, and we're living in kind of this zero-sum thinking, So I don't see it stopping until there's some sort of criminal liability on platforms, which we have been unable to put into law since forever.
Yeah.
And then we got smacked in the face with generative AI, which just lowered the barrier to entry, right? Like, picture this, it's crazy. Like 2019, you have the Internet Research Agency out of St. Petersburg, thousands of military personnel hammering on keys and fake accounts. And now, like, one person can pretty much automate that with scripts and just like invent stuff like out of thin air. So it's more like we're going to have to just start training ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's a big part of it. Similar timeline to you. Up in Canada, at the time, I actually was one of the first commercial consultants to ever get contracted by a provincial government during an election to do threat intelligence monitoring for electoral interference, and that was in the spring. That was in the spring of 2018. And what I found was really, it's a lot of the same trends that we saw from 2016 onward, like the same Cambridge Analytica playbook, is that was being utilized. I think the bigger problem is we need to look at global or international political misinformation campaigns for what they are.
Yeah.
They are warfare.
Yes.
Right? It is an intelligence warfare. And we hesitate in civilian society, like, and for the context of everyone, I'm a military veteran. We hesitate in civilian society to look at what this actually is. And in the military world, we call it the cyber theater of operations, because we are actually conducting battle with adversaries with real world kinetic impacts. And part of those battles is manipulating the political leadership of a country. Because if you look at traditional warfare, you look at traditional spying, and you look at the history of countries that have downfallen because, we'll say, certain three-letter organizations managed to corrupt their government. That is literally just classic global soft power playbooks.
Yeah, they went for the movies, they went for the theater, and then they went for the newspapers.
Yes.
Usually in that order. My history is in Latin America.
Yes.
And so now they just go for social. They go where the attention is.
Yes.
Right.
100%.
So
That's kind of wild. It's crazy, the world we live in this day and age.
I mean, look at how, if you look at the opening credits to most Hollywood movies these days, how many of them are financed by Chinese companies. And so the baddies tend to be, let's say, Russians,
All I'm
Arabs.
trying to say is, I am wholeheartedly surprised that John Cena is very, very fluent in Mandarin.
Oh my gosh. That's like a brand new fact. Look, we're all learning pop culture today. That's
Yeah,
great.
he's got a very close business
Interesting.
relationship in
Yes.
China. so,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Well, time for the final question of the industry questions from Mika. Do you think there's a need for more truly entry-level roles in the industry? And how do we get people willing to be involved in mentorship and skill sharing?
No, we got to fund it. It's not, dude, there are plenty of people who want to mentor. There are plenty of people who want to coach people.
Yeah.
We have to get organizations to stop putting ROI with every goddamn head count they hire. Like, if you want to invest in developing talent, that means you might have to take a loss leader and invest in a couple of prospects that don't work out. Or maybe you do train them up and then they leave. But guess what? They might come back and work for you even better.
Right.
I think the problem is we are so growth driven. We are so profit driven. We do not invest in the stakeholders. And this, not to get all like higher level political ideological, I really believe the problem with our industry and the problem with society as a whole is that we place way too much prioritization on the shareholder and not the stakeholder.
Yeah.
We are talking about a stakeholder problem, being the organizations, the customers that we're trying to serve, and the people that are trying to get into the industry to develop themselves. We're not prioritizing them. The only conversation that matters is what's the share price, what's the EBITDA.
Right.
And I think until we get over that hump, we're never going to get through this entry-level job issue.
Yeah, preach. It's incentives, right? Like, if they're trying to keep the P&L in balance, they're like, well, we can't afford that, so we will keep that lower. So internal stakeholders might be like, I really need this. These resources would be really great. We have a training program, whatever. On a balance sheet, it doesn't look great. So I have this wild idea. You're familiar with AmeriCorps, right? And we also have a lot of programs in the U.S. like you want to go to med school And
Right.
if you go to rural areas that don't have doctors, and you work there 5 years, we forgive your
Right.
Well, look at this. We have a bunch of people trying to do career pivots. They're going into boot camps. I mean, the parasitic boot camp economy is something else to tackle. But anyway, somebody spends 16 grand, 30 grand, whatever on these boot camps. That's an investment in their future. But it's a lot to ask them to do if, we have all these open jobs and then they can't get
Right.
filled.
But George, like, I gotta be real with you, man. I just think, and again, we have to fix the recruiting and hiring process. before we
Yeah,
get to
we're going to
this.
unfuck that.
But like, true, I look at like how I got into cyber, right? And I got into cyber how a lot of people ended up getting into cyber is I had a best friend of mine who worked in a SOC, and I was looking for work, right? And he got me a shot. He got me an interview. I didn't apply for shit. The funny thing was I'd applied for that same company multiple times for 4 years, from 2012 to 2016. I'd applied for them a bunch of times. They wouldn't even give me a call back. But when my friend who worked in there as a team lead was like, hey, dude, you should get a shot. That SOC manager gave me an interview, gave me the shot.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it really comes down to the networking aspect of it, because the actual formal process of recruitment is broken.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's
we have to fix
garbage.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's
Yeah.
so funny that we're talking
But
about these
I was
things.
going to say, if we can get like an AmeriCorps style program that takes
Yeah.
the incentive to invest in your education. Let's say there's like an accreditation program and you take a boot camp that's accredited and you have these skills. That program could then place you into organizations and subsidize your salary. That removes the P&L conversation from them, but it also gives you a shot to gain experience.
Yeah.
So you, the candidate, let's say you get 2 years experience in there, you now have job skills that are transferable. The organization gets a warm body in the SOC for 2 years, and maybe they also recognize a talent and they get to, like, at the end of that 2 years, keep you on. But we have to, like, look at where the pressures are and try to address those incentives, I think.
Yeah.
But yes, I think to answer the other part of Mika's question, yes, there are many, many people who want to mentor, but the pipeline is not there because of the incentive structure is kind of blocking.
And
it.
by the way, just I know I need to say this out loud. Fuck unpaid internships.
Oh, yeah.
If you're driving unpaid internships to try to staff up your team and then kick those people out at the end,
fuck
you're
you.
a piece of shit and you don't belong in the industry.
There was years ago when I was in college a site called Things White People Like.
Oh my God.
It was like
No, there
ages
wasn't.
ago, yeah. And one of my favorite things was unpaid internships.
Oh my God. Great. Yeah, no, I think that we need to be doing a lot more of this. So, like, not to change the subject around, but like at Teach Kids Tech, we're trying to do a lot more like programs with like the Microsofts of the world and do like paid internships so that kids that were, prepping and going through like vocational courses and things like that for cyber or certain areas of tech will have like, this chance to actually make money and do some type of an internship thereafter. So they're not just like stuck hanging around and like, all right, now what do I do with this like 3-month, 3-year thing that I just went through, right? So
100%.
yeah, interesting. Okay, well now we're gonna go to the juicy stuff, personal and random.
Oh, okay.
That's this category.
All right, let's
Here
do
we
it.
go, guys. Okay, this first one comes from Laura Kenner. I'd love to know a bit about the origin story of how you launched the podcast. Like, how did you get the idea? The vendor versus practitioner battle. Did you do proper market research and surveys? I know George does.
No.
Wait, hold on. Last part. Sorry, I got all excited about that. Or did you just run with it and see if it would stick?
Yeah. So we were joking that our future memoir will be titled Stumbling into Fun Shit.
I love that. Perfect. Story of my life.
So I had invited him. I was on the vendor side. I had invited him because he's a CISO, but we'd sort of been circling each other on LinkedIn to an event we had at Black Hat. And he showed up, and he'll tell his side of the story. But we sort of acknowledged that it was really awkward. And I was like, I don't, like, I'm not a salesperson.
This is great.
And then we started talking about that shared disdain for that awkwardness, or like if we could just all acknowledge the damn. Anyway, I think I WhatsApped him like a day later because we had sort of vaguely talked about a podcast. And I was like, man, this thing sells itself.
Yeah.
Like, I'm George on this side, you're George on that side. We should just do this. And he was like, all right, let's do it. And then really just stumbled into the rest from there.
I love that, though. I love that. Because people need to hear that. Because I feel like there's so many times.
There's
you know
no
this.
master plan.
I was so there's something to be said about just like being the first market or starting and improving over time versus waiting until there's perfection to actually begin.
Yeah.
And I love that. Okay,
Perfect
go
is
ahead.
the
Now
enemy of
I got to
good.
hear George A's take on this because
it's a typical Black Hat story. Like, I was there with my CIO and with my SOC manager, and we've been working the trade show floor the entire time, and we're doing a lot of technical conversations, trying to figure out like, okay, budgeting, and we had a couple executive things that we had to go with some of our current suppliers. So it's at the very end of the day, and I remember just like I had to move some stuff aside to actually make George's event, because I was like, hey, I committed to go to this dude's event.
This
I
is
don't really
just
know
decent.
him. Yeah, he just seems like a cool dude. I said I'd be there, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
be. I literally showed up with 5 minutes left.
oh my god.
Yeah, there was like a 5 minute left. I managed to grab like one drink and Miko,
Yeah.
and then like George and I just like went off to the side, and like the team was kind of like finishing up and starting to tear things down a bit, and we just kind of kept the conversation going. I think we were both just at this point of exhaustion,
Yes.
not only in our like standard work life, but like for the event. And it's just like, dude, this is fucking exhausting. I remember I just looked at him, and I'm a bit of a neuroatypical person, so sometimes I just get really blunt and really straight with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the Army.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I was like, hey man, look, I don't know if I can buy this thing or not, but why don't you just like send me some documentation? I'll like have my team look at it, and
Yeah.
then like otherwise fucking if my team's into it, we'll fucking call you.
Yeah.
And if not, this was a cool time, man. It was all good.
It was like refreshingly transparent.
Yeah.
That's
And it was
good.
so like, oh, great. We don't have to like do the
No.
awkward dance.
Yeah.
I know where things stand. Awesome.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that story. I feel like I've heard this story from you, but it's usually George K likes to tell me stories when I'm nervous for some type of event or speaking a thing that I love doing so much. And so I'm remembering fragments and bits and pieces from this, but I remember you saying like you were both just like, ugh, at
Yes.
this whole entire thing. And
Yeah.
that's nothing connects us more than things we just hate. So there's that. Okay, question number 2, coming in from Maria Harrington. What are some tips and tricks for being more confident and comfortable for public speaking, conferences, events, and video?
Tell us, Amber.
Please, I'd love to know from the experts, guys.
Experts. I don't know. I think you just got to do it. You got to get the reps in. Just get the reps in.
Get the reps in. There
Well,
we
you
go.
can do
All
things
the
too. Like
at-bats.
you can go to Toastmasters. Like
Yes.
there are associations that will like give you that
Yeah.
platform opportunity. But I think it comes down to communication skill. And so George and I were both like at the executive level in our career. Like when I met George, he was like a senior director and I was a CISO. So it's not like George
Yeah.
is like some neophyte. Like he's experienced. He's got like command level board experience talking to adults.
We can't tell. None of that is visible when you're talking to them. So
Like it's just like once you're at that level, you're kind of used to it, because I think you have to go through. You can't avoid situations that either might be tense or might be conflict,
Yeah.
and that is either in your personal life or in work. So if like there's an incident going on and everyone's freaking out and the client's freaking out and you've been called to the boardroom and some VP or some board member's looking at you for like a 30-second less briefing on like what is going on, you have to be willing to be that person who's going to take that answer.
Yeah.
And you might get blown up and it might suck a few times, like really, but you have to know that you're going to learn, you're going to get better, and the more you do it, as George said,
Yeah.
reps,
Yeah.
the more comfortable you are with it. And everyone's always nervous. That's the other thing too. Like we might look like we're not nervous. If you saw us at we did Black Girls Hat at Black Hat backstage, right? We were still going through like the actual like
Yes, we hadn't had time.
I would pay money to see this footage because I don't believe you at all.
We hadn't had
Yeah.
time.
You're both
to,
the calmest
to-
people I know.
But I think you've developed the muscle
Yeah.
memory of like, okay, so you're going to say this, I'm going to do that, and we'll sort of pick up on those cues. A few cheat codes. I did theater in high school, so I got used
Yeah.
to standing in front of people. But also, like, I worked for a big marketing agency, so you're pitching all the
Yeah.
time. And you're not just pitching, like, at clients. Like, you're always trying to win ideas. So you just have to convince people all the time of stuff. We had a fun game that we would do. We would be going up in the elevator to Sony or wherever big client, or HBO, and some senior partner would just give you a random ass word or combination of words, and it was understood the gauntlet was thrown down for you to get that in the pitch somehow.
Ew. Oh,
Like they
that's
might
my
literally
worst
say
nightmare.
like butterfly, and you're like, fuck, I gotta get butterfly
Yeah.
in this pitch to Sony or something like that. And it makes you think on the fly. And
They do this live. You're like,
yeah,
okay,
I'm like
we'll
in
just do
front of
this live.
Sony
Oh my God,
pitching this
stop it.
campaign, and I'm like,
Stop it.
in my head, I know the pitch because we've practiced
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And especially true in agency life, the greatest, it sucked so much, but the greatest thing was they made you know your pitch in case like HDMI
Yeah.
cable didn't work, whatever. You
Yeah.
could do it without your slides. You could tell the story. But because you had that confidence in the story, like inserting one random word was like not
Right.
too hard, but it was fun, and no one would know. They would know, and
Yeah.
we would know, and we'd sort of have an internal chuckle about it. But it's diffused a lot of the
It
nerves.
sounds like you guys need to do like a G squared, you know,
It is like
public speaking
You gotta
course.
look at it like so. George looks at it from the pure marketer standpoint. I am not. I'm relatively new to this industry. Like you've been
Mm-hmm.
probably commercial for way longer than me.
Maybe.
More I look at it as like high performance athletics because I used to be a university football player. I
Right.
played did wrestling, rugby, and all that stuff, and I fight now. And one of the scariest things you could ever do is compete in fighting. Like I won a provincial boxing title. I still compete in Muay Thai now. And backstage, it doesn't matter if it was like 12 years ago or if it's like today. I am still like 24 hours beforehand scared to death. 12 hours beforehand, psyched as fuck. 6 hours beforehand, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, I'm fine. I have a nice home. What
Yeah.
is this?
Why have I signed up to get punched in the
Yes.
face?
So, but then like when you're right like backstage and you're in kind of like the waiting area before your song comes out and you
Yeah.
do the walkout, you kind of like you have to bring yourself back because what happens if you don't control it, if you don't learn to control your emotions, and you don't learn to focus on what you actually have to focus on, which is the task at hand. Then you're going to be overwhelmed by your nerves.
Yeah.
And what happens is in fighting, what you get is something called an adrenaline dump. So you'll come out and you go through all this shit just to be able to step out and get into that ring. And then by the time the bell goes to start, you're
tired.
You're exhausted. You're already
Yeah.
done. You're bagged.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same idea on stage or when you're about to speak. If you spend so much time being nervous about what could happen and who's in the crowd and like,
Yeah.
what job you're trying to get, whatever, you're not actually focusing on the performance that you're needing to do.
Yeah.
And so when you become performance centric, all the other stuff like the crowds, the distractions, the
Yeah.
implications, the things after the fact, none of that shit matters. For the 9 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is that you got to do the thing, the only thing that matters is doing the thing. And
Yeah.
that's what you got to train yourself on.
Yeah.
I would say there are two practical things. Don't overthink it. So whenever I've done a keynote or we did our thing, there are like just enough notes for us to remember like what is
Yeah.
the touchstone that we have to hit. Because if you script it out and you try to memorize it, then you get sort of wrapped around the axle. You like missed a word and you
100%.
right. But you know, like at this point, I need to talk about this at this point, and you can rehearse that, and it becomes way more comfortable. The other thing is to slow down. When you get nervous, you tend to breathe faster. You tend to talk faster, and there is a rate at which you start talking faster than you can think, and that's when you get the ums, the uhs, because you're locking up. So,
Yeah.
like if you just talk at a slower rate like we are right now,
100%.
my thoughts can basically keep pace with this,
Yeah.
so it's smoother and you're not.
It feels like
tripping.
I'm in therapy right now, if we're being honest, because of how smooth and slow everything is. No, that's great because I remember George already knows. One of the first times I ever did that. By the way, that was like my first time public speaking.
I know. Sorry to put
When
you
we
on the
did
spot.
no, it's great because I'm sitting there like crying almost. I'm so nervous. I'm like, no. He's like, what? You're fine. You're gonna be fine. I'm like, don't talk to me like that right now. Okay, I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do. And it was like the worst thing ever because I remember so I have ADHD, so I wrote down what I was gonna say word for word because
Yes.
I tried to do the opposite and be like, I'm gonna say exactly this, and I did it with different colors. So I had like gel pens. I was like, pink was
I
gonna be
came over
talking
to you
about
in the
this.
corner and I'm like, what the hell?
And I was like, I'm gonna have to memorize all this. Oh my God, don't talk to me. But it's funny because my mom has this thing because we talk about public speaking all the time. Because anybody who knows me knows I'm deathly terrified of like live action, like just
Yes.
improv. Like, okay, sounds great. But she's, we have this joke, and hopefully it's okay to say on this podcast. She's like, just beat the shit out of it. Like prep and prep and prep
Yes.
and know your speech and know what you're going to talk about because at that point it doesn't matter. You can go, your whole speech could burn up and you're still ready to go because you
Yes.
at least know like the talk track. Like even
Yeah.
if you're improving at that point, you still know the general thing you're trying to get across.
Absolutely.
Which is a big deal. And I feel like over preparation sometimes. When you said don't overthink it, some of us who are still terrified, love to overthink it, because then we're like, all right, there's absolutely nothing that's, if I fuck up a word in my own head, at least I know.
I think that's a misapplication of like what you can control. So
Right.
you believe that you can control the script, so you invest a lot of energy in that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I would argue what you really can control is the story, right?
Right.
So
100%. And just talking to George and letting him, therapy that right out of you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to everyone's favorite questions, especially yours, the sales questions.
Thank God. Yeah.
Here we go.
unload.
So this one comes from, is it Elena?
Yeah, Olena.
Elena Bomko.
Yes.
Bomko. I love that name, Elena Bomko.
She's awesome.
Have you ever bought a tool or even booked a call after a cold email? There we go. CISO time.
No. Never
Surprise!
once. Never once in my entire career as an executive. And like before CISO, I was a director in charge of a managed services division. Never ever once has a cold call or a cold email worked. In fact, I'm usually like offended when you cold call me and it's an unscheduled call. I'm doing something else. Or I only like answered it because like I'm in the middle of something like busy, and I just like, oh geez, like what is this? Because I go through the rule that most security practitioners are like, if we don't recognize the number, we don't answer it.
Right.
And so now like sellers have started spoofing phone numbers, so please stop doing that, you assholes. But like because they spoof like to your local,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So
Totally not social engineering.
when you just like when you get the cold email, it just doesn't work, because how are you going to know my problem statement? How are you going to build trust with me? How are you going to start the conversation? Like, it'd be a lot easier to come to an event. If you want to sell to me, you want to come sell to me specifically, come to an event where I'm at. Like, I post where I'm at. I go to events in Toronto all the time. If you go to Toronto or Montreal, you probably catch me at a thing.
Yeah.
And if you catch me in person and come up to me like a normal human being and are like, hey, George, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. I work for these guys. We got some cool product. Have you come checked out our booth yet? We got some really cool things out there, man. I think we might help some problems for you.
Yeah.
If you talk to me like a human being,
Yeah.
I'm going to be really interested in what you have to say.
I can't automate it, George.
But at what point?
I can't schedule the 3,000 emails. No, so let's go back to the origin story. So I reached out to him for Black Hat, and it was the same. It was LinkedIn DM. I was kind of nervous about it because we needed to fill the room, and the BDRs weren't getting it done. So, but I had all these people I'd been talking to, and he and I had like vaguely circled around each other. I think anyway. So I said, hey, we have this thing. It's pretty cool. We're taking over this like e-games arena, and son is like, oh yeah. I've been following you for a time. Like, it wasn't awkward, and it was cold, but like the long game was we already had been sort of going back and forth. So similar to what he was saying, like if you go to the events in your territory, you will only make good on them if you have started to build some kind of ground game. And that ground game is not assaulting people with solicitations. It's showing up or just like this post, comment here in a way that's not like buy my shit now.
Yeah.
Like just be a person so that there's like more of
like ease into
yeah,
it
there's
a
just a
little bit.
thing.
I was going to
There's
say,
something
because
to build
at what
on,
point,
a relationship to build on.
100%, because as a security practitioner, I'm especially as a female, I'm like, okay, if somebody were to do that to find my time, like how would they know where I am? Like, what point does it become like creepy?
It's creepy.
Like at what point?
It's creepy all the time. All the time.
You're like, this is your invitation to just stalk and find me at all the events.
No, worse yet, we had a guest early on that talked about, and we brought him on for this reason. Someone was so obsessed with trying to sell to him, they looked up his partner on social media. Called his wife to try to get to him.
Who thought that was a good idea?
Like I swear to God, if you ever call my girl while you're trying to reach me,
she's gonna.
It's on site. I'm gonna knock you out on site, like straight up. Yeah.
Oh my God, that actually happened.
Yeah.
But there's a desperation there because
because it's sales.
Yes, but also like
real.
that looks like the process. Like I was joking, like what he's saying can't be automated. And automation is also a great way to do dumb shit faster. So yes, I can email 3,000 people.
Right.
And then just hope that I get a 5%.
That's so
return.
crazy. It's crazy that, like, okay, as a current person in the sales side of this space, guys, go easy on me. But no, I think, like, there's so many times where I'm told, like, from, like, a company perspective, and this isn't just my current company, but so many others that I've worked for, is, like, just send out the email. Like, do outreach. Like, blast that shit. I'm like, but what? Like, what?
Yeah,
That's not how I work.
It's harder. It's a larger problem with
Right.
knowledge work is that it's the annoying things in knowledge work today, like the return to office because we can't see you working, is literally sharecropping overseers overlaid onto the assembly line, overlaid onto the office. And it's number of dials, number of emails. Oh, I can measure that. Like we measured
Right.
bushels per acre,
That's
number
true.
of engines that came off the line. If I have X number of people
That's so
working on the
crazy,
line, I
though.
get. But we have to finally reconcile that the stuff that we're doing
Yeah.
today is not that same output. And like sellers are essentially relationship managers and diplomats. Like that's what they do, is that soft diplomacy, and that takes a lot
Yeah.
of ground
It's
game
so much
and
more.
EQ and
Yeah.
sure you might need to prospect, but I think that prospect can also not be awful.
Sure. Just like public speaking is so fun. So there's that. Okay, cool. So let's move to the next question because we have like a lot of these questions. I love this name. So Gentry Zollers. Zollers?
Yes, that's a good name.
Oh, Gentry's cool.
Coolest.
Yeah, yeah.
She's
Coolest.
nice.
I want to meet all these people. Meet all of you. So on LinkedIn, I generally ask questions and very inquisitive toward the security community. Be a peer and not a salesperson. I've introduced myself to some prospects at events very conversationally. I want to see if that's okay in the practitioner space, or will this put me behind the 8 ball with some folks?
I mean, if I'm understanding what she's saying correctly, she's going up to practitioners at like events and talking to them like a normal person.
Weird. It's almost like you just said that.
Like that's literally. I'm just like, okay, I can't. Yeah.
Organized
I think
security.
somebody sees, account rep or whatever. Some people are going to be assholes about it. They might have their guard up, but as long as you're not coming on strong trying to pick their pocket right then and there.
Yeah.
Like just I don't know, man. Like it's vibe's a thing. Like vibe is a thing in everything in life, and you kind of maybe have to have just a shred of emotional intelligence. But what is the vibe you're putting out on the floor?
Right.
Yes.
Right?
100%. I feel like this is something I've struggled with because, like, I was on the practitioner side for a long time. Then I became a sales engineer and then a solutions architect and all these things. But as a salesperson, because I did do that as well, I feel like there were so many times where like upper leadership would push on me, like, go ask. You need to start asking. I'm like, that's not how I operate. Like, maybe I'm not going to get 20,000 different leads done in this week, but you know what? I'll get 3 solid ones because I'll create relationships that'll go with me forever. Because at the end of the day, I don't care whether, this is like the worst thing you can say as a salesperson, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't care whether or not you buy from me. I care whether or not you trust me so that in the future we can continue a
I
relationship.
mean,
and
you ain't going to get the
make money
signature
together.
without trust.
So I actually
Right.
say this yesterday.
Yeah.
I took a lunch with another organization. They're selling not CNAP, but they were selling like a data mapping tool. It's cool. The guys who were on the table, I ran into them in BC at a conference I was at recently in Whistler, and they set up the whole thing. Those guys I had worked with previously with Lacework. I don't even think Lacework's around anymore.
It's
Whatever.
moribund.
But anyways, at the time, I was in a dance with them for about 6-7 months trying to buy Lacework, and they were just, full transparency, far too expensive for a mid-sized shop.
Right.
But the relationships were good. Like I liked, like my seller, Marc Antoine, was a great dude. Benoit was a great dude. There were a lot of great dudes there, and I attended a few events with them, and we had a good relationship. And we came like literally, it was on my CFO's desk, and they didn't sign it, right? So like that's not on me, and they know that's not on me, right? But as a result of that, like they moved on from that organization. I run into it again. And it's friendly and it's warm. I don't even know, like the new organization they're at, I don't even know what the fuck they sell. I don't even care.
But you're
I'm
willing
like,
to take dinner
yeah,
with
they're
them.
them.
Yeah.
Right? So I
They're
like them.
them.
So I'm going to hang
I
out with
love
them. What are you
that.
guys selling? Once you have that trust with a practitioner, with a practitioner leader, that's a green card for life until you fuck it up.
Well,
Exactly.
and also people talk,
Yeah.
right? So like he's not like out there blowing up their spot because he trusts them. He's
Right.
not going to be like, don't ever buy from these people because they're
Right.
charlatans.
Exactly.
But if they don't trust you, they do say that.
Yeah.
I am also in the CISO Society as a head of community,
Mm-hmm.
and people give very frank feedback on my rep is totally marking it up like 25%. Is this happening to anyone else with this vendor? And they, because they want, I mean, I don't know any human, let alone security practitioner, who is operating in a vacuum. Like they're going to go talk to
Right.
people.
Security's a team sport, bro.
Yeah, they got to talk to people. They
100%.
got to like among colleagues or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you got a bad name, you probably don't even know that you've torched your territory.
Yeah,
Because they're not going to
100%.
tell you, but
100%.
suddenly people aren't taking your phone calls anymore. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Tethics, guys. Be tethical. Okay, perfect. Next question. Jessica Wayland. There's a balance between relationship-based selling and that funny little thing called quota that weighs in the balance of the back of our brains each and every day. For those sellers that might be starting out and may not have industry knowledge, what are some easy to understand resources that they can consume that will help them not look like they wear a dunce cap or consume only the corporate Kool-Aid as they craft their outreach? Is there maybe 3 do's and 3 don'ts you would suggest right off the bat as starting points?
Like for a new person, I would say don't come off too salesy. Like I know you're in a sales
Ever.
job, but don't
Yeah.
come off like that. Like when you're having that conversation with me, and this is the hard part to explain to people, and this is where the coaching of a good mentor comes in. It's how to demonstrate that energy, especially like over the phone if you're not having the opportunity to do it in person, where you've done this before, right? You don't have that nervous kind of like overselling sort of angle, like where you're willing to jump on anything that the prospect gives you. When you're calm, you're relaxed on that phone call, you are going to get infinitely more success just because you're not coming at it with nervous energy. If I feel that you have nervous energy, I like want this call to end. I want nothing to do with it.
Yes.
And the other thing
100%.
too is kind of take the time. I hope your organization gives you the time for it, the runway. Take the time to learn your service and your product enough to be dangerous. And by that, I mean, can you talk about it in your own words? You don't need to be the founder or the solution engineer. You just need to be able to talk about just some surface level basic functionality, because that's going to gain your prospect's trust. If you call me about a product or service and you can't actually talk to me about it because you're not capable, you're done. You're out.
Yeah.
Analogies will be your friend.
Yeah.
Yes, you are the queen of analogies. I would say first do is just listen, right? You should listen to all your customers. You should probably talk to customer success and like understand what is working well and what isn't. So, and then put time on the ground. So there's a great resource called infosecmap.com. These guys put together an incredible database. You can search cybersecurity events by type, city, literally any dimension. And so I don't care where you are. There's an ISSA chapter, there's a B-Sides, there's a Secure World. There's something there that you should go to and just start talking, start hanging out, start feeling the crowd. But also to his point, I think a lot of salespeople are told, like, you're going to do this and then, like, bring in the sales engineer. Security is a team sport. You need to go hang out with your sales engineer and like ask tough questions. And again, the best sellers we know aren't technical insofar as they have like any sort of engineering degree, but they have gone so deep into the documentation that they can explain it backwards and forwards.
Oh yeah. I feel like the best reps are technical.
Yes, and you know they have that, but it's not like I do this and sales engineer handle all the tech questions, because again, like.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't
I
trust
love
you.
that I'm seeing more and more of that, by the way, where I'm like, oh, well, okay, the salesperson's got some game. I love this. And it's not just the SE the whole time. So that's great. And by the way, for anybody listening, both of my best friends, I met when they were my reps and I was their sales engineer. So be nice to your sales engineers. It'll pay you back for your life. Okay, the next question. Wade Hansen. Big fan of the pod. It's been helpful to get both perspectives to navigate the mistrust between vendors and customers in this space. As a relative newcomer to the commercial side of cybersecurity, I see companies like GuidePoint and Optiv who have built a significant book of business by bridging that trust gap as value-added resellers. How do each of you view the value add that these VARs bring to the equation? What are the pros and cons and best practices for working with VARs from the vendor and the customer perspectives? Oof.
Do you want to know the real truth?
Yeah,
I'm getting away from VARs.
Oh.
I find them to be useless. like for the most part. I find that they love charging their 10 to 15 points just to give me a purchase order.
That's the value add.
But then I could just, for most organizations, and especially now that like money is no longer free, I know that a lot of organizations that used to be like, you have to go through this VAR or that VAR. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to renew with you now. Then they're like, well, no, you can go direct to us. We'll give you the discount. So now, because money is tight and quotas are getting heavily enforced, they're changing their tune. And for VARs, like if you really want to add value, send me someone who's going to figure out for me how I can best deploy the thing you're trying to sell me.
Right.
That's value. But you just like giving me the PO and quarterbacking that like sales process.
Yeah, I've never understood that model.
I all it is it's organizations who are like OEMs or whatever who don't want to invest in their own sales team, right? So they outsource it out to the VAR. But the problem is the VAR doesn't know how to sell your product
Because you are one of 1,000 on the
Right.
and you don't have like as close of a relationship with even the AEs on the OEM side if they're going through a VAR, because the actual transaction conversations are through the VAR and it just adds another layer, right? So until VARs actually get more involved with the sales process, and that's at ideation, that's at discovery, that's at the actual solution architecting,
being
Yeah,
in
like
the
a
room with
consulting
you.
firm.
being in the
Right.
room,
Yeah.
then I really just find them useless. And my CIO and I are on the same page, is that if we can get rid of them in the relationship, we do.
I've heard this more and more, so he's not alone in that. It's the perception is the value add is really just the margin pad versus like an assistant, a consultant, an ally in the room.
Right. I was going to say, because we all know I came from a VAR, and two, actually. One of them was listed. But I will say this. Here's what's crazy. So when I was at one of these VARs, and it's not the most recent one, it's the one before that, I was like a technical account manager. So I was both. And I sat there and I was like, you know what? I feel like I refused to take the title like salesperson. I was like, dude, there's no way. I just went, my whole life I've been an engineer and a practitioner, and if I put the word sales anywhere, like I'm screwed, right? Without the word engineer next to it. So they made me a technical account manager. I think it was like some weird title.
TAM.
But either way, I was like, this is kind of like the role of the future for VARs, because you really have to have like a consultative approach to everything from like an engineering perspective, but like just enough soft skill to actually like sell it and like be able to converse this and like get this through to a board of directors or whoever it is that you're actually representing, because then you can take that and use like the architectural side of your brain and go, okay, how can we consolidate stuff you already have so that we can save you on, so you're not spending more, we're actually just reallocating money that you already have and like developing kind of a new architecture and program.
Or they've been in the room and they know there's a new
Right.
plan or a new maturity curve that you're aiming for.
Yeah.
But we should get to the lightning round.
Ready for the lightning round. Here we
Let's
go.
do it. Fast
Okay.
answers.
Zentry Zoller says, George A's favorite hockey team.
Montreal Canadiens.
Okay, perfect. Brownon says, weirdest place or situation in which you've recorded the podcast.
I was in an Airbnb closet. I threw a quilt down. Stevie, the sound engineer, understands because it was echoey as hell. I was so hot. I was like sweating on the podcast, but it was the only place that I could record this quiet.
That's great.
Yeah. I was at the balcony of a hotel that we were running a strat planning thing with our division in Europe on. So I was dealing with European Wi-Fi, people having smokes all around me, and just like randomly coming into the shot while we were trying to deal with background noise from the street in Serbia.
Sounds chaotic and amberish. I love it. Okay, biggest podcast pet peeve.
Don't come to our podcast and like snack.
Yeah.
Jesus,
that was
Christ.
weird.
ASMR.
Dude, that was weird.
And I was like, what part of you thinks that this is okay? This is like high fidelity mics. Don't chew into them.
Oh yeah, crumbs and everything. What about
He
yours?
knows what I'm talking about, right?
When guests come like almost not prepared to talk, like do you remember that one guy that
We
you
just
were,
like pulling teeth, man.
yeah, it was just pulling teeth out of him,
Yeah.
and I hate that. Like, why are you on the show then if you don't want to talk?
There you go. Okay, what's the full story behind the Fist and Bolt logo?
Oh, I gave my friend Jamil the briefest of creative briefs, which is the show will be called Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks for this reason. And I don't know. It's got to be aggressive. There's got to be a fist in there. I don't know, like lightning and insight and whatever. And she's like, okay, I got it. And that's what she came back with.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love that.
She's a genius.
Okay, Aaron Kinder, if you had to choose between a world with no 0-day vulnerabilities and no surprise meetings, which would you pick?
Oh, surprise meeting, hands down.
Oh, I was going to say
Hands
0
down.
days.
Surprise meeting,
Of course,
hands down.
security and CISO, that's perfect. Okay, Eloise Taylor, if practitioners and vendors had to physically battle it out gladiator style over a security contract, what weapon would each wield and who would win?
I'm going to say, I think that the vendor is going to go defensive because they're trying to like protect that contract, right? They're going
Okay.
to come out with the shield, but I don't know.
So it's vendor versus who?
The buyer
Vendor versus buyer
in the Coliseum.
in the Coliseum. I'd say like we probably will have
No, it's
was
just
it-
vendor versus vendor.
Oh,
So it's
vendor.
not-
Oh, it's vendor versus vendor. Oh.
This is
Oh, wait,
like-
no, I'm sorry. It is practitioners and vendors.
Okay,
Oh my God.
then
Go back.
I go back to
Forget
that. You know the thing with it's like the spiked ball with the chain on the end?
Like a mace?
A mace, yeah, a mace. Like we would be using a mace because for us it's like we don't want to talk to you, so get away. But then we do want
keep
to talk to you,
distance.
so get over here.
Oh, wow. There you
Yeah,
go. Okay,
nice.
and last one. Elena
Yeah.
Bomko. Should cybersecurity marketers and sales people learn cybersecurity? And do you have any special group chats where you put and discuss all unethical companies?
Answer to the second one is 100% either in communities or private WhatsApp groups. That's happening more and more. So your name and your rep counts for a lot. Marketing and salespeople, yes. I don't think you need to. I think out of curiosity, you should learn cyber stuff. I mean, I've been working with computers since I was 7, so like a lot of the networking stuff I already knew. But
Yeah.
my education was more in talking like how do you build a program, like learning about the stakeholder management and like the structure of teams. So I think if you're trying to sell technology into a team and you don't know how a team
Yeah.
operates, it's I don't know how are you gonna do
Yeah,
that?
just wing it.
Yeah, I just want to key on a point that George said there is curiosity, right? So we talk a lot about curiosity being a critical factor in a security analyst having success in their career. If you're not a fundamentally curious person, security is really not for you. I think the same thing goes with sellers, and they should be curious enough about the tech, about what they're selling, about generally what's happening in the industry, to have that open-mindedness. And I think there's a world of a difference. And you don't have to have a STEM background, but if you are curious and you are a hobbyist about tech, there's a difference between talking to a seller that actually likes the stuff, likes tech, versus someone who's just like, I have to do this because this is what I'm doing for work.
This
now.
is the widget. Buy the widget.
It's
Yeah.
two completely different things. And from me as a practitioner, I definitely want the person who's curious, who's open-minded, who's going to be a good what
I love that. Yeah, just give a shit. That's
Yeah.
really what it comes down to.
That's what we're gonna.
It's our
end
new
on.
T-shirts.
That's
You're
what,
welcome.
Give a shit.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, that kind of wraps it up for like all the lightning rounds and all the other questions. And thanks, guys. Thanks for joining my show today. It's been
That's
great
right.
to have
Thanks,
you
George
on.
D.
Yeah, absolutely. George D, the host.
Props to kids, teach kids tech.
That's
Ah,
right.
yes, teach kids tech, y'all.
That's right.
Start them as early as possible. Navigate. Oh my God, I can't even.
It's all right. This isn't the
Navigate
blooper reel.
Around,
Oh
yes,
my
this is
gosh.
great. Around all of these obstacles early.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, that's it. That's episode
Woo!
100
Thanks, all.
in the books. Thank
Love
you
it.
very much
Thank you.
to Bright Future Media and
Absolutely.
our media partners.
And
You
our
guys were
friends.
great.
Thank you.
thanks, everyone.